Hello, I'm Dick Corsell, and welcome to Community Care Network Connections. Community Care Network is the parent organization of Rutland Mental Health Services and Rutland Community Programs. And today we are going to be talking about youth in transition. And my guests today are Scott Louiselle, who is a clinician with Rutland Mental Health Services. Alisha Keel is a case manager with Rutland Mental Health Services. And Jaymie Shuck is joining us from the Boys and Girls Club of Rutland County. And all three of these individuals are very much involved and active in youth and transition services in the Rutland region. Now, we've had guests on the show that have talked about a lot of issues related to this community, from the very young to the very old, developmentally disabled individuals, mental health issues, and what have you. This is the first time we've been focusing on this issue of youth. And the Rutland community obviously has struggled in recent years with an increase in issues with respect to youth behavior, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and what have you. And it's a topic that I think is important to discuss in terms of how youth are aging in this community and the challenges that they face today compared to what we may have faced growing up, or certainly what our parents did. This is a much different community than it was back that time. So I'm going to start with Alisha and ask you, what are some of the challenges that youth in the Rutland community face now, and how have things changed since you've been doing this work and what you know has been done in the past?
One of the challenges off the top of my head is homelessness. There's a lot of youth who don't have stable housing or are couch hopping, and they are considered homeless. There's also substance abuse, mental health issues. We run into a lot of kids who, in the fall, who are looking for stable housing. Housing's always been an issue. I know we've met with a lot of different housing committees to talk about this, so it's been an ongoing issue in Rutland County. The same thing with substance abuse and mental health issues.
So, any of you like to comment a little bit at that in terms of how this has changed over the past few years? Because I think one of the things we've seen is a change in the nuclear family. There was a time that mom and dad were at home, and many years ago there was primarily one or maybe both parents worked, but it seemed much different for youth. And this obviously, there has been a change in society that is now requiring us to address this transition.
One of the important things to keep in mind here is 16 to 22-year-olds have a set of complex issues that are very different from those that they grow up with and those that are faced in the adult world. And I say 16 to 22 because when we talk about youth transitional programs, the state of Vermont really provides funding in those areas, feeling that that's a population in itself that's very, very different. So when we talk about traditionally overlooked areas in mental health and gaps in the system, this often arises. And I think we have individuals here who have been part of child and family systems growing up that have been very accommodating. In some ways, there's school planning to individualize services. There's also a variety of looks at wraparound services and coordinating with other agencies that happens very often in child and family. As we move into the adult world, the focus becomes personal responsibility, independence, self-sufficiency. So when Alisha mentions, housing, this is one of the natural goals of being in that age group that needs to be met at some level. And for a lot of our kids, that might mean the difference of survival for them. So we look to accommodate people as they move from that, in some ways, a dependent system to this more independent system. And of course, we're focusing, being mental health clinicians and case managers and youth center folks, we're looking at youth that are at risk in the community and that are meeting some of these variables such as substance abuse that Alisha mentions, folks that are dropping out of school, I think, are another group of folks that we like to focus on. So we have those folks come in and be part of the system that traditionally may not have had the skills to come out and access things from the system, and also may be very aware of the stigma related to mental health treatment. And particularly at that time in people's life, 16 to 22, that stigma's hanging right over their head. We need to, as providers, open the door to those folks to have a strength-based approach that looks at the positive aspects of what they're doing in their life. And also, we have a responsibility to create a rapport with these young people and a relationship that's long-standing. We become someone that they trust. We, in turn, trust them. And that builds the foundation for a relationship in which these kids can get their goals met, overcome the variables that they need to in their lives, and move on and be successful.
Let me ask you, Scott, as a clinician, why, for example, Rutland Mental Health is involved in an issue like youth transition. I mean, it is a traditional mental health agency, developmental disability agency, substance abuse. What is it about this particular issue in the Rutland community that has created a need for this agency to respond with its expertise? Because you just mentioned a lot of different things that are applied to this particular issue. But why is this an important issue for a mental health agency to involve itself with?
For one, it's a very important time in people's lives where there's a lot of transition and change taking place. And as we know, transition and change can cause stress. And when stress happens, mental health issues, whether they're predisposed or not, can show up at that point. And we look to identify some of those things, which then, of course, become barriers to meeting the self-directed goals in the community. So as a mental health agency, really where we're coming in here, we're finding folks that are at risk. And I think Jaymie's going to talk a little bit more about youth coming in to programs like this. But we find people at risk, we identify what the mental health needs are, and then we can provide varying levels of treatment depending on what the needs are. And these programs traditionally have to be very flexible. They have to be programs that allow for community-based services as opposed to someone coming in, sitting in an office. There has to be a focus that's outside the box, not traditional mental health work, but creative, forward-thinking mental health work.
Okay, that's interesting. I want to ask Alisha, why collaborating with other agencies, and Jaymie, we're very interested in hearing about Boys and Girls Club and the many programs that you offer for youth and the collaboration, but why is collaboration for Rutland Mental Health, in particular in youth transition services, so important? What really comes out of working with other agencies, and why is there a need to do that?
What I'd like to talk about is kind of developing wraparound services, because the youth can come to us and we can, set up plans and work with them on their goals. But if there's another community partner out there who specializes in, let's say, housing, it's great to make a connection with them because that's where their strength is. And making those connections with the community partners and finding more resources and connecting the kids with them is also showing them how to be independent on their own and to give them the best service that they can find out there. Because I might know a little bit about a housing, but the Housing Coalition knows a lot more than I do. So why not make that connection and lead them to them? And the same thing with working out of the DropIn Center. Kids come in there if they need mental health. Well, then I'm the liaison to Rutland Mental Health. So we're just making stronger connections.
What are some of the agencies and collaborations that you currently work with in this region to help bridge that gap? Because I've heard Scott talk about a gap, in particular at that age where there may not be support services that are either readily available or known to some youth. Who are some of the organizations that you might work with on a regular basis to help these kids?
On a regular basis, we've worked with the Housing Coalition, the Housing Authority, the Rutland Area Prevention Program, the Women's Network, to name just a few of them. Jaymie, need you?
Voc Rehab.
Vocational rehabilitation is a big one. We've worked a lot of diversion. We've made some connections with.
Voc Rehab is an important one because we talk about school to work transition.
But for folks that don't know, when we say Voc Rehab, we're talking about the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, which is an office in the Department for Children and Families.
That's right.
It's a state agency. So what do they do, and why is it important to have that relationship with Voc Rehab?
Well, as someone enters a transition from school, they have been supported by the Department of Education in the state of Vermont up until that point. And if someone has a disability, they're supported through special education services. For those folks with a disability, at the point they transition out of Vermont Department of Education programs, they can transition into Voc Rehab of Vermont programs. These programs are going to support them with accommodation in the workplace, meeting their goals of education and training, actually getting in to meet employers and talk with them, be part of job fairs and the Department of Labor and those great things, and to get in there and hopefully someone catches on, really ends up getting some employment and ends up being a very productive member of our society.
And that is such an important aspect, in particular when we have so many young people looking for work. I mean, there was a time not very long ago when a young person in high school, a teenager, or just having graduated from high school could find employment. May not have been exactly what they were looking for, but it was gainful employment, and at least they were able to get on their feet. With the unemployment rate, with the economy that has dragged on for several years, that is creating such a stressful situation for families and for young people who can become quite despairing and lose a lot of hope. In particular, if they are unable to find something or may not have the resources to relocate. So I know that's an important issue. I want to talk with Jaymie about the Boys and Girls Club of Rutland County. A lot of people are very familiar. It's a very successful and important organization in this community. Talk a little bit about the Boys and Girls Club of Rutland County and what your role is there.
Well, the Boys and Girls Club, we serve youth 6 to 21 through different programs. We provide after-school programs for 6 to 16-year-olds, Monday through Friday. We serve them dinner. We provide extra academic help, provide them with some recreation time, and anything that they might need after school care that parents are working and that can't be provided. So we're there to do that for them. We also provide services to 16 to 21-year-olds, which is our Youth in Transition program. And I work as the director of the Life Skills Center, which is over that program. What we do is, again, we're open 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we invite any 16 to 21-year-old off the street to come in and hang out, relax, watch some TV, get on the computers, use the phone, do some laundry. Or we also provide job services, resume help. We provide liaison with Rutland Mental Health if they feel that might be an issue, something they might need. We help them get set up with the Housing Coalition or the Housing Authority. We just help make the transition into adulthood just a little bit easier for them.
Make connections with doctors' offices if they need help doing that, or filling out Medicaid applications, or for 3 squares, or getting them to appointments. And sometimes just sitting with them and making that phone call. Yep. Just taking that extra step to help them out, or helping them fill out that application.
And I'm sure that the whole system of care can be very overwhelming for a lot of people. I mean, it is, I know that when we've talked about senior services, for example, on this program, and that's one of the things that can be quite daunting for an independent senior, is to be able to navigate that system of care, because there's so many, you know, so many touch points and complex forms and processes and procedures. So one of the things that you do then is help these young people identify what type of services and then how to access these services. How did this collaboration between Rutland Mental Health and the Boys and Girls Club come about? I mean, when did this collaboration start, and why is this so important to be working together on this issue?
Well, this is part of a grant, a federal grant. It started almost 2 years ago now. 2 years ago. This Youth in Transition grant actually takes place across Vermont through other Boys and Girls Clubs and other teen centers as well. And
I think Boys and Girls Club should be commended, as when this grant came about, they really did a great job of pulling in all of the community providers into their agency to ask them questions about what gaps existed, you know, exactly what we had talked about, and how we were going to address those gaps with the money that was available. So through that came this teen center program that Jaymie and Alisha have discussed, which really has been a success, and I think a model for other counties and Boys and Girls Clubs in the state to really work under and try to match if they can. So I think Rutland County really has done well with the program.
Let's talk a little bit about the center, where it's located and how youth can access it. And you mentioned some of the services that are provided. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on those. And one of the things that's always interesting to hear are, you know, personal success stories. Obviously, we never disclose names, but if you can think, for example, of a young person that you have worked with that has had a transformation based on these types of services, I think our audience would like to know about that. That's really why these things are so important, because they make a difference, a positive difference in a young person's life, which improves the community overall. But let's talk a little bit about the center, Jaymie, and then we can talk a little bit more perhaps about some of the people that you've worked with.
We're located on Merchants Row. Well, the Boys and Girls Club is located on Merchants Row. The center, the Drop-In Center, is inside the Boys and Girls Club, but our entrance is around the back side of the building across from TD Bank.
On Evelyn Street.
On Evelyn Street. So that's how any teens can come in and access. They'll go around the back and come in through that door there. We do have quite a success story, actually, and I'm going to let Alisha tell you about that, because she's been able to work hand in hand with this person from the beginning.
Good.
We did have a youth that brought into the center through outreach, and just to kind of get him out of his shell and to start accessing the center and socializing with peers his own age. And through accessing the center, he started volunteering there and helping out. And then after this summer, we switched back to normal hours, 11 to 2. We wanted to be open 5 days a week and offer free lunch. And to be able to do so, we had to hire somebody to fulfill that position that we could pay 5 days a week for lunch, so our regular chef at the Boys and Girls Club could focus on the Boys and Girls Club kids in the evening. And we had that youth who came in every day and who volunteered. He'd show up early. He's gone to youth events with us. He is now working for us there, and he loves his job there. He shows up early every day, and he even comes back in the evening and helps with the Boys and Girls Club. So this has really given him an avenue to explore, you know, working in a kitchen. And then if he decides to move on someday, it'll give him a great resume and references, which is a lot of kids are struggling with. They don't have the work experience. They don't have the references. And just getting your foot in the door is what a lot of the kids are facing, because they're fighting for jobs with other people who have degrees, and they're just out of high school and have no experience.
Right,
So
and we all know that idle time generally is not a good thing if it's an extended period of time for a young person. And that's one of the things this community is dealing with. I mean, the forums on substance abuse issues that are going on now, you know, certainly when we look at crime, you know, prison populations, all of this stuff is being addressed acutely in this community because we are experiencing those things. And so programs like this, I mean, it's nice to, I'm sure there are many, many success stories, and often what you don't know is when you've been able to prevent a particular young person from doing something that would be harmful to themselves or others of the community. Sometimes we don't have those statistics, but it's the influence that you've had on them where they feel like they have a resource, that they're not alone in this. And I think that's what's important for people to understand, is how different things are today for youth than they were. Because, you know, you talk with people that have been in the community for many years, and some people are just incredulous. You know, it's like, hey, kids grow up, you know, we didn't have all of this. Well, I think we all know that this isn't the same community. Everything has changed. Technology, growing up today is a completely different experience. You know, social bullying, all of this stuff, and it really has a significant impact. Scott, I know you do a lot of work in schools and work with school districts. How do you work with schools to, for example, identify kids who may need the services that Jaymie and the Boys and Girls Club provides, or, you know, Alisha through her kind of liaison work with Rutland Mental Health? How does that happen?
Sure, it's a great question. I think that special educators, guidance professionals, administrators at various schools in Rutland County would call us and ask one of us to either join them in a treatment team meeting or come in and meet a youth and their family and present services. So at an initial level, what we would do is we'd assess a situation. There's a possibility there for some consultation and referral. If someone's interested in our services and we're feeling like it's a good match, someone's going to come in for an evaluation. The school plays an intricate role in that, in that they have some input in terms of what they feel the needs are. So that there's a nice connection when someone's graduating to have the same programming that they had in school after school. So we do an evaluation with somebody. After an evaluation, we'd have a really good idea of what the issues are. We'd ask the individual to self-direct some goals for themselves through our guidance and coaching. We'd then set up a plan to meet with them throughout the week, dependent on the intensity of need. Certainly would certainly predict the time that you'd meet with this person. And then over time, hopefully you develop and hit some of the obstacles and barriers that they have in their lives and help them get to whatever their goals might be. And that's generally how the relationship develops from school to community work in transition.
Funding, that's good. It's good to know. I think that's an important element of this. Funding's always an issue. It's always an issue for any social service program. It's an issue probably for just about everything. How do you address that gap in funding? Because we are talking about having to fill gaps and have funding from one particular entity and then fill it in with another. How does that work with this program?
Well, I think traditionally programs in mental health have been funded by certainly health insurance and Medicaid and those types of programs. We've looked to have a collaboration with vocational rehabilitation where they provide us with a grant in which we can do some of the work that we do, including employment services for young folks. So that's a very important piece of all this. And that's really at a programmatic level. As we look at services for an individual, Voc Rehab and Department of Labor may also provide some short-term funding for folks who might want to try out a work experience, for instance, so that it's a no-risk situation for an employer to bring a young person in for a 6 to 10 week period of time and try them out. Voc Rehab helps out with workers' comp insurance and liability insurance. There's some work expense reimbursement that is there for the youth, and that employer can get to know that youth. If they work out, a lot of times the youth's hired and can remain at the employment venue. If the youth does not work out or wishes to pursue something else, they walk out of that with a strong reference and really something nice to put down on their resume as they move forward. So those types of funding outlets are things that are very helpful to us in our day-to-day work.
Yeah, Jaymie, how do you, that obviously with the Boys and Girls Club, it's always an issue when you're dealing with trying to find the resources to keep these services going. I would imagine that a lot of outreach has to happen in order for you to get to the people that need to know that this is important and this is an important investment in the community.
Most of our funding, well, not most, but it's a lot of it comes from grant writing, donations, those types of things. Of course, because we are a nonprofit, so we really have to rely on the community to help us out. So we invite the community in numerous times throughout the year to have dinner with us and the kids, just to see what goes on and see what their money is going towards. And again, writing lots of grants. There's all different areas that we need money to come in for, whether it be art, education, recreation, so yeah.
It's a lot to put together.
Mm-hmm.
How do young people or their parents or employers get in touch with you guys if they have more of an interest in the youth transition programs? What's the best way to reach out? I'll give both the contacts for Boys and Girls Club and Rutland Mental Health.
Just come in.
Just come in,
just come in.
On Merchants Row?
On Merchants Row, yes. We do a lot of flyering and street outreach. So you'll see information on most of the community billboards about the center. We go out and walk the streets and look for that youth in transition age so we can talk to them and let them know that we're there. But just come in.
And what's the web address for the Boys and Girls Club? Because there's probably a lot of information that's available on that as well.
Well, actually, the best way to get information on the center, the 1621, is to go to the Facebook page.
Okay.
So, and that's just the center, and that's the Facebook page.
Great.
You can find much information there.
And Scott, for Rutland Mental Health as well, what's the best way to get in touch with you and Alisha?
Alisha and I are located at 78 South Main Street. Someone could certainly drop in and ask to speak with us or make an appointment. Also, probably the old-fashioned phone also is. Do
they still use that?
They do. They do still use those. And that is 802-775-2381. And you could ask for Alisha or I by name.
That's great. This has been a very important topic, and I really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope to have more conversations with respect to youth in transition. I'm sure we'll have you guys back, and perhaps others that you work with at some point in time. I think it would be great to have a couple of young people whose lives have been transformed and changed because of the work that you have done. So I think the community owes you a great deal of debt and gratitude for the great work that you do. So I want to thank Scott Louiselle from Rutland Mental Health Services, and Alisha Keel, and also Jaymie Shuck from the Boys and Girls Club of Rutland County. Thank you for appearing on this show. Very good topic and a good conversation. I'm Dick Corsell, and you have been watching Community Care Network Connections.